all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood. From my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood. From my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood. From my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues and the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening. Welcome. Nice to see a little square picture of all of you. So tonight we dive into this book, Moonbeams of Mahamudra. In case you're in the wrong class or place or something, I don't know. So I believe we finished through page 29 and we're starting on page 30. Anybody believe otherwise? And just for context, we're in the chapter called Shamatha and Vipassana. So this little overview and preview of these two practices, including the emphatic statement that all samadhis are included in Shamatha and Vipassana. And we went through the identification of each of them, what their characteristics and natures are, and then the causes of Shamatha and Vipassana, and the identification of obscurations to those practices. I'm just flipping through the pages, and how to remove those obscurations generally and specifically. Suppleness, mindfulness, alertness, applied intention, equanimity of remaining in the natural state. Those 5 factors. And then we're in the way to drill down after that on dullness and agitation. Very rare experiences that very few people have ever had. And now we're on the identification of their essences. We're getting to the crux of the situation. Okay, so on page 30. The Unraveling the Intent Sutra. So this is the sutra of the Buddha, attributed to the Buddha Shakyamuni. It's called the Samdhinirmochana in Sanskrit. It's amazing. It's a very cool sutra, one of the main sutras for the Yogacara tradition. Main sutra of the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma. In fact, it presents the scheme for the 3 turnings, definitions of them, and it presents the 3 natures. And has an amazing chapter on meditation, which we've gone through in some courses here at Rime Shedra in the past, and probably will do so in the future soon, because it's a very cool sutra, and there's a new translation by the 84,000 project, led by Jamyang Khyentse Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche. Anyway, in that sutra it says, staying alone, isolation, having correctly settled their mind internally, bodhisattvas bring to mind those dharma topics upon which they have reflected carefully. They are attentive because their mind continuously engages internally with the mental state that is being brought to mind. The physical and mental suppleness that arises while abiding that way and resting in that repeatedly is called shamatha. So, bring to mind dharma topics upon which they have reflected carefully. So outside of meditation, we reflect carefully on key topics of the Dharma, such as the three skills. What are the skandhas? How do I experience the skandhas? What are the ayatanas? The 12 ayatanas that have a sense base and a corresponding sense object. And in what way does that summarize my entire experience? Just like the skandhas is another way of summarizing our entire experience. And then lastly, the dhatus, the three realms that include the sense base, the sense faculty, the object of the sense faculty, and the consciousness that arises from them are some of the main topics. Dependent origination would be another one. They are attentive because their mind continuously engages internally with the mental state that is being brought to mind. So we're conscious of our state of mind as we're focusing, bringing to mind Dharma topics upon which we've reflected carefully. So experiencing what are thoughts, experiencing our skandhas, our body, our feelings, our perceptions, our conceptual, emotional framework, our consciousness, the different channels of experience through the senses and their objects. Physical and mental suppleness that arises indicates that this is the culmination of the practice of shamatha. This happens after the 9th stage of shamatha, and we'll get into this further. And resting in that repeatedly is called shamatha. Having achieved physical and mental suppleness, meaning they've accomplished, one has accomplished shamatha, they abide there and relinquish mental images. Mental images are like graphic images, computer graphic images, in that they represent something else. So mental images are our internal representation of what we think are external phenomena. So the color yellow, a flower, we have internal images about these objects. My body, the past, the future, inside my body, outside my body, everything we think about is a mental image. So we relinquish mental images, not paying attention to them. They discern and have conviction about the Dharma topics being reflected upon as the representations for the sphere of internal samadhi. So instead of thinking about our concepts, our thoughts about things, we try to experience the realms of the skandhas, ayatanas, and the dhatus as the objects for the sphere of internal samadhi. With regard to those representations for the sphere of samadhi, any differentiation of the meaning of the noble objects, so any mental activity that separates them, this is mind, this is body, this is the eye sense consciousness, and that's the ear sense consciousness, differentiating the meaning of noble objects. Noble objects is shorthand for everything. Thorough differentiation. So completely differentiating objects from each other. Complete discernment. Completely understanding them, recognizing, understanding what is the experience of the mental factor of doubt. What is the feeling of the mental factor of aggression, and so forth. So the mental factors being number 51, and contained 49 of them contained in the 4th skandha, 2 being separate skandhas. Complete analysis. So analyzing them in terms of their nature and their variety, the 2 ways that we can analyze phenomena. Nature, what is their nature? Are they truly existent? Are they interdependently existent or dependently existent? Or, sorry, are they independently existent or dependently existent? Are they made of parts or are they single? Are they unitary? Analyzing phenomena in all these different ways in terms of their nature and then their variety, how they appear by function of cause and effect. When we experience forbearance, which is a odd term, and in English, I think, does not nearly convey what the significance of this is. When you look at the way the 16 moments of the path of seeing are arranged, which have 4 aspects of each of the 4 noble truths, there's 2 groupings of 8 each within each of the 4 noble truths. 2 of them are understanding the nature of suffering as being pain and what is another characteristic? Impermanence. And then there's a forbearance that is sort of after we understand something, we sort of let it gel in our mind, let it really sink into our bones. So the forbearance is when the meaning sinks in and becomes part of our fabric. Interest, we have curiosity, differentiation of particulars. So now we're not looking at necessarily a progressive order, but we're looking at different mental activities. Differentiation of particulars as opposed to general. General objects are mental images, and particulars are specific phenomena, such as the book that you hold in your hand or the computer screen you're looking at. View, how do we look at them? We look at them as one extreme or another extreme, or beyond the 2 extremes, or thought. We think about them. All of that is called vipassana. Sounds like a very active process, doesn't it? Very intellectual, interestingly. The Jewel Cloud Sutra, shamatha is the one-pointed mind. Vipassana is discernment of what is true. Discernment of truth, of what is true, what is really there. That's a slippery slope, isn't it? Like, what really is true? The ornament for the Mahayana Sutras by Maitreya, or attributed to Maitreya, says, know the path of shamatha to be the summary of the names of the Dharma. This is an odd phrase that you see every once in a while, and basically the Buddha taught in 12 different ways. He taught life stories, he gave examples, he gave direct instructions, he taught by analogy. There's all these different ways of categorizing that he categorized his own teachings as 12 different ways. And the preparation involves understanding all the teachings of the Buddha individually. And doing that is to be the summary of the names, understanding the names of the Dharma. What are all the different characteristics, the categories? In other words, all the lists that everybody loves so much is like knowing all the lists. And strangely, that's shamatha. You wouldn't think that's shamatha, right? But it's like shorthand for what was mentioned above. They discern and have conviction about the Dharma topics they've reflected upon before. And so you don't go into them discursively in shamatha, because shamatha is non-discursive, but it's understanding. Oh, I'm breathing. Oh, I don't know if they say the word oh. I think I'm adding that. Sorry about that. Anyway, know the path of vipassana.
In that first paragraph, because that first paragraph threw me off, it didn't sound like shamatha. Are they saying in preparation? Like, I get these paragraphs, they make sense, and the Vipassana one makes a lot of sense, but that first paragraph, contemplating the dharmas, and I'm like, am I supposed to be
Yeah,
contemplating?
I think a lot of this is probably unusual, and usually it's the Vipassana that's unusual, or maybe it's that in the courses I've done with in Rime Sheda we focus on Vipassana, so we go into that more. But also shamatha, when shamatha is presented as a samadhi, like the perfection of shamatha, shamatha is not about pebbles and sticks and the breaths and syllables or images or anything like that. But shamatha is concentrated attention, focused attention on the meaning of the Dharma that we've already understood, impermanent. So it's like the four reminders, precious human birth. So doing that contemplation, which many of us do at the beginning of practices that we do, is actually a shamatha type practice. Understanding impermanence, understanding karma, understanding the suffering of samsara. Strange, I know. Hopefully, I think it'll be fleshed out a little bit. So, let's uh, let's see how they do that, and certainly I'll come back to it. Know the path of Vipassana to be the analysis of their meaning. Meaning in terms of like, what is their nature and what is their extent? Nature being, how do they exist? Do they exist as one or many? Like, is there anything that's a unitary object, or can everything be broken down into components? Do they exist independently, or are they dependent on causes and conditions? And knowing the variety of phenomena is knowing what gives rise to what conditions give rise to what, knowing karma, knowing the operation of interdependent origination, basically. It also says, because on the basis of correct stillness, shamatha, mind rests in mind, which can be um, understood in two ways. One is either talking about the phase of shamatha where we don't have the breath as the object anymore, but we have mind as the object. And maybe you experienced that earlier in the meditation through the leading instruction I tried to give to do shamatha on the nature of knowing, on the nature of the mind. Um, or they could be talking from the point of view of that basically everything is mind, so mind can't rest anywhere else. Even if you think about your mother or your car or your mother who is a car, or is there's a show of that, right? My mother, the car, right? Um, all of that is your mind. So it's not quite clear. And because phenomena are thoroughly differentiated, those are shamatha and vipassana. So clearly the differentiation is vipassana. Slightly different than most of us have learned from Trungpa Rinpoche. In his commentary on that text, being meaning the Ornament of Mahayana Sutras by Maitreya, Vasubandhu remarks, because on the basis of correct samadhi, mind rests in mind, and because phenomena are thoroughly differentiated, we should know that those are respectively shamatha and vipassana. He didn't add a whole lot so far, but they are not an absence of samadhi. Those are the characteristics of shamatha and vipassana. Generally speaking, it is clearly taught, that concentrating on any object of meditation and resting the mind one pointedly without distractions is shamatha. Concentrating on any object of meditation and resting the mind one pointedly without distractions is shamatha. And it is taught that the mind that differentiates and analyzes by discerning the nature of knowable objects is vipassana. We have that phrase, noble objects, again. And it's sort of like, how much time do we spend thinking about things we know nothing about, things we can't know? It's pretty hard to think of something you can't know. In other words, everything is a knowable object. But it is shorthand. It's shorthand for phenomena, the dharmas, the scheme of the dharmas. Those are the characteristics. Sorry. Um, as it is taught that the mind that differentiates and analyzes by discerning the nature of noble objects is vipassana. Furthermore, everything from the first stages of settling the mind on its object, and resettling up, which is the second stage of the 9 stages of shamatha, up through the final stages of creating a single continuum and equipoise, is said to be shamatha. So that's a way of describing the completion of shamatha, which comes after the 9th stage. A single continuum and equipoise. Interesting phrase. Everything from attention and differentiating the characteristics of the nature of noble objects, implying that that's the initial stage of vipassana, through the final stages, the full development of the spontaneous engagement of expertise and prajna. What an interesting phrase that is. The full development of the spontaneous. So spontaneous is non-conceptual, not contrived. Engagement means it is a mental cognition of expertise, fully knowing, and prajna, transcendently knowing. Transcendent knowledge is said to be vipassana. Then he quotes the Bodhisattva Bhumi by a Sangha, focusing the mind with certainty on just an inexpressible entity, or an object that is a mere referent. So I believe this is a way of referring to objects that are not conceptual in nature. Conceptual objects are known by an expression, by a name. Like I can say, that glass of water, these glasses. And so I'm able to express that entity, but entities in themselves, non-conceptual experience cannot be expressed, or an object that is a mere referent. So concepts refer to objects. So when I say the glass, that's a word created by sounds, and in our minds we've all agreed that that assemblage of sounds refers to a certain type of object, like a bunch of sand that's been melted down and shaped into a container and has water in it. So real objects are the referent of mind, of terms, names. So focusing the mind with certainty on just non-conceptual objects, shorthand, brings to mind perceptions that are free from elaborations and mental distractions. So it separates the mind from mental elaborations, thoughts, and distractions. That wasn't me, by the way. That, I mean, for a change, it usually is. But dedication to all objects of meditation. Impartially, I like that. Settling the mind on the characteristics of internal samadhi, which have been described somewhat, the mindfulness, alertness, intention, and so forth that we went through, the factors that get rid of the obstacles, and we'll go through them again in detail. Resetting, continually coming back into your meditation when the meditation has declined, let's say, up through the full development of creating a single continuum, meaning like you meditate and it's continuous. There's no like breaks in your attention. Having begun meditating, it doesn't end until the end. And the engagement in samadhi, which is transcendent meditation, are called shamatha. What is vipassana? The same mental attention cultivated during shamatha that brings to mind the characteristics of those dharma topics being reflected upon. And the implication is that any object that shamatha has is a dharma topic. Interestingly enough, presumably when you understand that object from the point of view of the classification scheme of knowable objects, such as classifying the glass of water as matter, separate from mind, separate from feeling, and so forth. That same mental attention cultivated during shamatha that brings to mind the characteristics of those dharma topics being reflected upon, that differentiates. So there's this sort of common description of different stages or aspects of vipassana, and this starts with differentiates, thoroughly differentiates, that thoroughly differentiates dharma topics, which sounds like the same thing to me, up through that which fully develops expertise and that which engages with prajna are considered vipassana. So fully develops expertise is completely understands the nature of phenomena that are being experienced by shamatha, and that which engages with prajna are considered vipassana. The objects of meditation for shamatha and vipassana are, so I'm on page 32, the objects for meditation for shamatha are, among knowable objects, non-conceptual images, which is what I was explaining on the prior page. And for vipassana, they are, among knowable objects, conceptual images. So knowable objects consist, in some sense, you can divide knowable objects into non-conceptual images and conceptual images. An odd way of describing phenomena, but meant to point out the way that we experience them. Everything is from the point of view of how do we experience our world. And in this tradition, which inherits the earlier traditions of Buddhism, cognition happens through the representation of the external object in the consciousness. And we experience the image in our consciousness that our senses take in. So our visual senses experience color and light, and they register into our visual system and create an image internally in that system. And that's what we experience. So currently it's like these very formulaic almost and confusing descriptions of these practices, and gradually he'll unpack them so they become a little more relatable. But they always start out with like the most ultimate description of each practice. It is said in the Unraveling the Intent Sutra Bhagavan. So this is Maitreya Bodhisattva asking the Buddha, how many types of objects are there for shamatha? He replied, one, non-conceptual representations. Everything, all objects of shamatha are non-conceptual objects. How many kinds of objects are there for vipassana? Only one, conceptual representations or images. How many types of objects are there for both? Now that was an interesting question, which I wouldn't have asked, because it didn't seem like there was another object that would be the object of both, but not the object of each one. But I am wrong. And the Buddha replies, two. Strangely, the limits of existence and the accomplishment of the purpose. Pretty obscure phrases, huh? The limits of phenomena means understanding the two extremes. One extreme is what's called projection. Is we project onto a phenomena, onto a non-conceptual image. We project basically a conceptual image, thinking that something exists in a certain way. And the other limit is denying that things have any existence and therefore have no causal efficacy. Everything is an illusion. Nothing matters, doesn't matter, Karma doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's like the ultimate apathy, right? And the other one, the accomplishment of purpose, is a name that encompasses a number of different objects that are focused on its specific purposes, like um, contemplating ugliness as a way of overcoming sensual lust, contemplating um, Maitri, loving kindness, as a way of overcoming or dealing with aggression, and so forth. From the text, the instructions on Prajnaparamita, which is by Ratnakara Shanti, all non-conceptual representations, the objects of shamatha, qualitative and quantitative, I'm not going to go into that, but are the objects of shamatha. All conceptual representations, qualitative and quantitative, are the objects of vipassana. Someday soon we're going to see an alternate translation, qualitative and quantitative. We'll have to work on that. We should put that on our list for Elizabeth, please, Cynthia. Maybe the Tibetan for it or something. According to the sutra-oriented approach, authentic shamatha vipassana must be posited as the attainment of suppleness. So we saw this suppleness earlier. This is the physical and mental suppleness that arises at the completion or the perfection of either shamatha or vipassana. So authentic shamatha vipassana is posited as the attainment of suppleness and the attainment of samadhi that engages continuously and naturally. And the suppleness is described as mental and physical, and the descriptions of it are fascinating. They generally talk about how there's like a little sense of heaviness that enters the body, that pervades the body, like a sense of pressure. And they actually say it's like as if somebody placed their hand on your head and were pressing down lightly. And that's the first stage of the physical suppleness. And then gradually it changes, and the heaviness gives way to a lightness. And it has a very pleasurable feeling. And gradually the pleasurable feeling diminishes until there's just a lightness of body. And then the mind, there's like a clarity and a flexibility of mind. And that has a similar progression from a sort of initially very coarse experience to whatever that means, and joy or bliss, joy, and gradually the joyful quality diminishes, and it becomes a very even, fine experience of just dexterity, mental dexterity, clarity, stillness, strength, the three qualities of accomplished shamatha: clarity, stillness, and strength. And in the case of the body, a physical pliancy, where it's like having done Pilates for like 20 years, maybe. I wouldn't know. I'm only starting. Okay. So the first of Kamala Shila's 3 books, called The Stages of Meditation, says, once distractions related to external objects are pacified, resting in the mind that is supple and takes delight in engaging an internal object continuously and naturally is called shamatha. So shamatha is necessarily resting on an internal object. It's the internal representation, non-conceptual representation of external or internal phenomena. But we rest in the mental representation of that phenomena, whether it's internal or external. And all distractions to external objects are pacified, resting in the in the mind that is supple, so it's experienced suppleness and has joy or delight, is shamatha, or resting in shamatha. Any analysis of just that is called vipassana. So many of the explanations of vipassana are analyzing the nature of the mind in shamatha. And that becomes one of the more common ways of describing it, is that shamatha is a still mind, a settled mind, one-pointed mind, and vipassana is analyzing the nature of that mind, looking at the suchness of that mind. Nevertheless, we may ask, how are the shamatha vipassana, how are the shamatha vipassana which suppleness has not been achieved described? So what is not complete practice in those? It is in this context that the term an approximation of shamatha vipassana is used. Sort of an odd point that they have to differentiate that there's incomplete shamatha vipassana that has its own special term called approximation or facsimile, unraveling the intent against, says Bhagavan, during the period the bodhisattvas have not attained physical and mental suppleness. Suppleness, she's calling it suppleness. Elizabeth, when they inwardly attend to mind observing mind, what is that attention called until before it achieves suppleness? Maitreya, that is not shamatha. It can be said to be similar to a conviction that approximates shamatha. So it's close. It continues, Bhagavan, during the period the bodhisattvas have not achieved physical and mental suppleness when their mind inwardly attends to those dharma topics that have been properly reflected upon. So it's not a discursive analysis in vipassana, even though it sounded discursive. Differentiation, thorough differentiation, um, uh, investigation and analysis. It's not a discursive process. And that's an interesting point. It's like, what is discursiveness then, as opposed to mental activity? Like, we can have focused mental activity, like sort of clear thinking that's not discursive, as opposed to sometimes we consider any mental activity to be discursive, right? So
So
anyway, yes,
different.
sir.
So it's like the difference between cognition and actually discursively thinking something through. We do this all the time. I used to call it faster than words thinking,
Mm, mm.
right?
That's nice. Yeah.
I'm
It's like
walking
you see something. Yeah. You understand it.
I'm walking down the street. This happened. This is when I really noticed it. I was walking down the street. This is years ago. Walking down Ludlow Street, and on two sides of Ludlow there were construction sites, but one of them had like netting around the side of the building. So I immediately, before I even thought about it, went to that side of the street. And then I stopped at myself and I went, why'd I do that? I didn't think about doing that. I just did it. And that's when I went faster than words thinking.
That's great. I
But
love
we
that.
do,
Thank
but,
you.
but we do it all the time. Like if you ride a bike or if
Yeah.
you do something automatic, you're washing dishes, you know,
Yeah. Your mind is like calculating how to do everything or
there's a
what
flow
things are.
happening and you do it,
Yeah.
and that's cognition.
Yeah. Spontaneous was the word used earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's just cognating all the time. You don't need words to do that. You don't need concepts to do that.
Yep.
You just do it, right? And like in meditation, it seems like when discursiveness pops up, it's like listening to one side of a phone conversation. It's like a reaction to that. You know what I'm
It
saying?
is. Totally. Yeah. Thank you.
Is that what we're talking about here?
I believe so.
Okay, because when doing analysis, after you keep repeating it, like progressive stages of meditation, you don't need to say the words in a row. You just
Right.
sort you just sort of bump your mind to, where's the self in the skandhas, and zap, it happens. You don't find it. You don't have to, like, oh, is it in this leg? Is it in that leg? It doesn't happen. It happens really fast.
Exactly, and that's the whole idea of working with objects that we have previously fully comprehended,
But
that they have properly reflected upon previously, so that it doesn't have to be discursive, but it's faster than the speed of words,
right.
faster than a speeding word.
Derek, can I follow up on that?
Yeah, yeah. What
Trying to
else?
understand or square, and maybe it's not possible, the notion of panoramic awareness.
Oh, what a cool term. Where did you hear that?
Actually, I think it was in an earlier class. But as the definition of Vipassana and what Robert just said made me think, maybe that's the link. That there was something about seeing that netting that you would not have would not have acted faster than thought if the awareness hadn't been there.
That's neat. That's good. Yeah.
But the term panoramic awareness, after for this whole class, I've been trying to imagine how that lines up with what we're studying right now.
Yeah, why? Why that particular term?
Wait, isn't that the traditional definition that Trungpa Rinpoche presented us with?
Ah, that's right, that's right. Yeah. Trungpa Rinpoche used that term famously, right? Panoramic awareness for Vipassana. That's right. So what was he getting at? Yeah, we spent a lot of time working on this. We did a whole course on understanding his presentation of Vipassana, basically. Yeah, it's a very tricky subject, and interestingly, if you look in the Profound Treasury, which goes through a lot of the material that we'll be going through in this book, because Rinpoche used this book, right, for his teachings. Um, and you go in the index, it doesn't he doesn't mention that word once in the Profound Treasury.
It's true.
Isn't that wild?
He mentions Vipassana,
Oh yeah, but
but
he
he
doesn't
doesn't.
call it. He doesn't call it panoramic awareness
Right.
once in the whole presentation of Vipassana. In that, so this is a larger topic, but so there's just like briefly to address it without not addressing it. So that's the not address is like one possibility is he was kidding, right? Right. That is a possibility, right? He wasn't. He was he was known for or it would not be the first time that he like was intentionally slightly inaccurate in describing something, right? Is that
Well,
like is that like heresy, where like he describes it one way first and then another way the next day? Like when he introduces Vipassana in his first seminary in 1973, the first talk on Vipassana, he says Vipassana is I think he used the word, I don't know if he used the word exclusively. He says Vipassana is a post meditation practice. And then the next day, in the next talk, he says Vipassana is also a practice we do on the cushion. And then most of the rest of the presentation that he gives is Vipassana on the cushion. So, so that's one option, is he was kidding. Another option is when you go through the entire explanation of Vipassana, there's two types of Vipassana has many different types, many ways of breaking it down. And one way of breaking it down is that there's analytical Vipassana and non-analytical Vipassana. And so maybe he was focusing on non-analytical Vipassana and calling it that. So most people feel that he was talking about non-analytical Vipassana. In which case, however, you have to try to understand in your own in your sorry, you have to try to understand in what way was it Vipassana, panoramic awareness, and look at how he describes it, and look at what is it that makes a meditation vipassana. Is it simply non-analytical experience is vipassana? And on the on interestingly, what we've just read is the description of shamatha was non-analytical, right? Non-conceptual. So if you feel that panoramic awareness is non-analytical vipassana, in what way is it vipassana? It's clearly non-analytic, but in what makes it vipassana? So there's one other way of
The knowing quality makes it vipassana.
Yeah.
where's the knowing quality in panoramic awareness? The term.
Awareness.
Well, the knowing that you're in that's what's happening. It's not a passive state.
So let's go back a couple of pages to the
I wonder if it's a
presentation.
little bit like what Robert was saying, where you're seeing in the environment, in this panoramic environment, many things that are known. So you're able to know a whole environment.
You're able to know the entire range of experience in the
The
panoramic
environment
awareness.
that you're sitting in while you're
Does Rinpoche talk about the knowing quality when he describes panoramic awareness?
Doesn't the word awareness in some way imply knowing?
It it does. Awareness certainly is knowing. So it's
Maybe
It's
awareness is experiencing. Is experiencing and knowing the same thing?
yeah. So if you go back to page 25, does anybody have a digital version? Do I need to give coordinates for digital people? So let's see. It's in the general explanation of the remedies for obscurations. Tagpo Tashi Namgyal says, he goes through the obscurations, and he starts,
You
he
said
first
page
see,
25?
yeah, but I went back to the beginning of this section for the digital folks. So on page 23, we have B, the explanation of the remedies that remove those obscurations, and the first part of that is general explanation. And and he lists then he lists the 8 applications, eliminate 5 faults, and here's the 8 applications that eliminate the aforementioned 5 faults. And he says the first 3 are easy to understand. The remedies for laziness, faith, motivation, and exertion. Those 3 are easy to understand. So then he starts by explaining the 4th remedy for laziness, which is suppleness. And he describes suppleness, which we were just talking about. And at the end of that, he talks about mindfulness, non-distracted, not forgetting a familiar object. And he talks about alertness. And he quotes from Maitreya's differentiation, says, when mindfulness has become non-forgetfulness, there is recognition of dullness and agitation. That indicates that when mindfulness is fully present, it possesses alertness. Within the sustained stream of the aforementioned mindfulness, alertness examines what is present or not and continuously stands guard. And then he quotes from Shantideva, and the second quote from Shantideva is repeatedly examine the condition of your body and mind. That alone sums up the definition of what it means rather to protect alertness. So this is this general sense of knowing what's going on, right? Does that sound like panoramic awareness? In what way is panoramic awareness different from that?
So it's a sense of knowing.
Yeah, a
But
sense
I
of
think that
knowing.
there's also, I guess my sense is that then we're getting to the panoramic aspect, because whereas shamatha is more focused, when you talk about, it's a little bit more one-pointedness is often used in the definitions of shamatha. And to me, the sense of panoramic is a little bit the opposite of that. It's widening and expanding the awareness.
So, your premise is that the difference between those two is the extent of the focal object of the object of meditation. One is a limited focus, and the other is a larger focus,
Or an unlimited, perhaps,
or an
as opposed to
unlimited. Yeah.
larger.
So, one of the common objects in the early tradition for meditation was space.
Mm.
Would you say that space was sort of focal, limited, focused, or expansive and limitless?
I would say space is limitless, but to be putting your attention on space could be seen as being slightly limiting, that one is aiming to focus on one thing as opposed to whatever might be there. Saying focus on this particular thing has a bit of a shamatha element. I just want to also acknowledge that Eric had his hand up for a while.
I know, we're coming to him.
Okay, just
Yeah.
he's being so polite. I figured he should be.
Eric, please share with us what you were going to say.
This discussion or the connection between these things reminds me always, because of my own personal favorites, of the chapter, The Portable Stage Set in The Path is the Goal. And it connects all the things that everyone's saying. I don't know if I should just throw that out there or I called it up. I mean, I don't know if I should read a few words from that, but he talks, just as Cynthia said,
Just
Trungpa
do.
Rinpoche,
Yeah,
of
please do.
shamatha. Oh, okay. Well, the idea of the portable stage set is that everywhere we go, we
There you
set
are.
up this little stage set where we play the role of our life, and usually we accept that role as reality. But then when we practice shamatha, he says, from shamatha practice you settle. From there you begin to expand. And then mindfulness is being fully there, and awareness is a total sensing. In awareness, all happenings are seen at once. That could also be called panoramic vision. Panoramic vision is having a sense of the entire radiation that we create. We possess a certain mannerism or a certain style reflected outward. It goes on, but the idea is that there's the opportunity to see and question and analyze something you haven't seen before. That the panoramic vision gives you a chance to do Vipassana investigation of your whole trip or stage set, which connects what we read in the book with this strange term of panoramic vision. It does for me anyway.
Does he describe an investigation of what we experience?
Yes. At this point, we were just introducing the difference between the.
Read that. That was a
Yeah,
very interesting sentence. He gives this whole explanation of so-called Vipassana, and then at the end he says, at this point we're just...
in the situation you experience.
Oh, you don't want to read that sentence, okay.
Oh no, wait. I was skipping around. He uses certain words
Yeah,
to
because the
suggest
Tibetan...
that that's when the investigation begins, because you can't investigate it until you see it. That first glimmer of panoramic, like all the things that are going on. What sentence was it that you were pointing me to read, but I skipped to a different section? Well,
You started reading. Here at this point we're just describing...
oh wait, we're only introducing later living experience. what is necessary to understand now is that Vipassana experience does not proceed to the level of the game, but remains purely
You skipped
at the
a part. You skipped a part.
Later we will go into it in
No.
greater detail. No?
At the beginning of the sentence, he
At
says.
this point, we are only just introducing the Vipassana experience. Oh, sorry, did I not read that?
No,
Yes.
you did not. Thank you. Introducing. Now, earlier, does he give a Tibetan term?
There's no Tibetan in this. None.
Do you have continuing your confusion?
Is
Well,
that a different chapter? Yeah.
well, at one point in that book, he's describing what he's calling Vipassana, and then he gives a Tibetan term, which is Sheshan. And Sheshan happens to be the Tibetan term for alertness.
Oh, yes. Alertness or awareness. Your attitude is changed. In practicing Vipassana, instead of keeping very busy setting up your theater, your theatrical stage, your attitude is changed so that there is a sense of questioning how we produce this background, why we do it, whether we have to do it or might not have to do it.
So what happens to the panoramic awareness when you do the questioning?
Well, the panoramic awareness, quote unquote, sets the stage so that we can actually see what was invisible and then question it.
In other words, the panoramic awareness precedes the questioning.
I like that. I think that's actually useful. That I think it seems like he could have been using this as a skillful means to bring people toward Vipassana. You know, that it's a way to go from the nature of shamatha to the quality of Vipassana. So there's an expansion, a widening, but that's not the end of the story. You know, it's not just like opening up and staring into space. Then you can also do analytic stuff as well in that context. So I think that's kind of an interesting interpretation, that it's like a bridge or a way into.
And an organic development in your practice rather than sort of a new thing. It's like an organic opening that allows for investigation. Anyway, pardon me for going on at length, but thank you.
No, that's helpful.
Yeah, you're not doing it. It happens.
Yeah, so in my humble opinion, his presentation of Vipassana was alertness, and that does indeed provide the setup for then the discursive or analytical Vipassana of the questioning that Eric just read, that he describes. So it's a difference in names and a skillful means, as Cynthia was saying, that he called the preparation for Vipassana. So I know that's a little controversial, so I don't want to upset anybody. But and you know, so as we go through this, you have to think in your mind, how does panoramic awareness, which I think we would all agree is a non-conceptual, indicates a non-conceptual state. How does that compare to this description where shamatha is non-conceptual and Vipassana is conceptual? Is panoramic awareness conceptual or non-conceptual?
But didn't we, even in the intro, go through the fact that distinction, as if one is the shamatha, the idea that shamatha is always non-conceptual and Vipassana is always conceptual, was false? Wasn't that in the introduction as a preview of what's coming?
It was. So it gets more complicated. So that was her introduction, and we have these quotes here that are pretty clear. So we have this semi-contradictory situation that we're going to have to thoroughly examine, thoroughly differentiate, and investigate.
Can you remind us where we are now that you're going back?
Yeah. So now we are back in...
I think we were on 33.
Yeah, 33. Let's forge onwards. So we were getting to we had the facsimile of shamatha, the approximation. We have a similar approximation of Vipassana. So we have two quotes that talk about the facsimile, what do they call it? The approximation of shamatha and vipassana from the Unraveling the Thought Sutra. And then on 33, we have a similar quote from the instruction of Prajnaparamita about shamatha and vipassana. So after that, we may now ask, at what point do the paths of shamatha vipassana become fully pure? It is taught that when sluggishness and drowsiness are overcome, shamatha is pure, and when agitation and remorse are destroyed, vipassana is pure. Sluggishness and drowsiness, agitation and remorse. As it's stated in the Unraveling the Intense Sutra, Bhagawan, at what point is the path of shamatha pure? Maitreya, when sluggishness and drowsiness are completely conquered, shamatha is pure. At what point is the path of vipassana pure? When agitation and remorse are fully overcome. The presentation of the divisions of shamatha and vipassana. When shamatha is categorized in terms of its nature, there are two types: mundane and transmundane. When it is characterized by its function, there are three: the shamatha of resting at ease in the present life, and the others. Too bad we don't know the others. I think the others are accomplishing, being of service to others, and can't remember the third one. The most well-known categorization is by means of method, the 9 states, as given in Maitreya's ornament. After you have directed your mind to an object of meditation, do not be distracted from the continuity of that mind directed to the object. In his explanation of that, Vasubandhu lists the 9 states. Beginning with, after you have directed your mind to an object of meditation, these 4 verses describe the methods for settling the mind through the 9 mental states of resting. They are called settling, constant settling, definite settling, increased settling. It's a lot of settling. Taming, pacification, thorough pacification, and creating a single continuum and equipoise. The compendium of Abhidharma lists the same. It's pretty much the same terminology, and these will be described in this section on shamatha. Categorizations of vipassana. There are 3 types: vipassana arising from characteristics, and the others as taught in the Unraveling the Intense Sutra. Maitreya, there are 3: that which arises from characterizations, that which arises from thorough investigation, and that which arises from discernment. What is the vipassana that arises from characteristics? And by the way, right, so all this arcane stuff we have to go through here in order to get to the good stuff, right? Everybody's like has a headache, I think.
You say that all the time, and it never comes.
The good stuff never comes. In the second part of the book, we go through the Mahamudra section, Mahamudra, Shamatha, Vipassana, all the other supporting stuff. So.
What year will it be when we get to that part?
In the year 2929. Let's see. The one that arises from characteristics is that which only brings to mind a conceptual representation for its sphere of samadhi, and that which arises from thorough investigation brings to mind dharma topics that were not well understood by prajna that was directed at them in order that they be understood. So first one is analyzing what conceptual representation is. The second one is completing our understanding of dharma topics that we've thought about in the past, such as emptiness or identitylessness of self and phenomena, and contemplating those in vipassana to the point where we understand them with prajna. And then from discernment is to bring to mind dharma topics that were already well understood by the prajna directed at them, in order that we may feel bliss through liberation, in order that we may revisit the liberation, the freedom that comes from understanding emptiness, the selflessness of persons and phenomena. There are also the 4 types of vipassana, all these different types, exciting, differentiates phenomena, that differentiates thoroughly, discerns completely, and analyzes phenomena. From the Compendium of Abhidharma, it is the differentiation, thorough differentiation, complete discernment, and complete analysis of phenomena, those four stages, which Rinpoche goes through in the Profound Treasury, Volume 1, in like chapter 44, because it is the remedy for negative propensities and characteristics and overturns what is fallacious and is the settling of the mind in what is not fallacious. They are identified in the Shravaka Bhumi as follows. What are the four types of Vipassana bhikshus based on? So Shravaka Bhumi by a Sangha, part of his massive Yogacara Bhumi. Let's see. Based on the internal minds, shamatha, they are the differentiation, etc. How is differentiation done? It is conducted with the quantitative aspects of the objects of meditation for purifying behavior. The objects of meditation for expertise and the objects of meditation for purifying mental afflictions. So objects of meditation for purifying behavior, again, are those things where you figure out what your main klesha is, like passion or aggression, and you contemplate the opposite. Like for passion or lust, attachment, you would contemplate the deterioration of the physical body through the 9 stages of decomposition. And for aggression, you would contemplate loving kindness and compassion. The objects of meditation for expertise are the 3 skills, the skandhas, the ayatanas, and the dhatus. And the objects of meditation for purifying mental afflictions is for understanding the 2 identitylessnesses, uprooting the kleshas. Thorough differentiation is conducted with the qualitative aspect of those 3 objects, meaning what is their nature? Are they truly existent, or are they relatively existent? Are they imaginary, dependent, or perfectly complete objects in terms of the 3 natures? When attention endowed with prajna joins with discernment to apprehend the characteristics of those 3 objects, that is complete discernment. When there is correct discernment, that is complete analysis. A little bit vague there, just sort of like levels of completion of those prior 3 experiences. Furthermore, the same text says, those are the 3 doors of Vipassana, which we just went through earlier, the characteristics, thorough investigation, and discernment. And the focus is on the 6 categories of the basis. So there's also the Vipassana that focuses on the 6 categories, which Rinpoche calls the 6 discoveries, and goes through in detail in chapter 46 of the Profound Treasury, Volume 1. Those are the 6, let's see, in brief, these encompass all forms of Vipassana. Although it uses the term 6 categories, those are 6 modes of inquiry undertaken with the Vipassana of thorough investigation, since they are explained as the investigation of meaning, entities, characteristics, qualities, time, and reasonings. These 6 ways of analyzing phenomena, or 6 types of phenomena in our world. And this is like a distilled list from a list of 10 that Asanga gives in, Maitreya gives in his differentiation of the middle and extremes. They are called the Vipassana that investigates meaning and so forth, meaning being the first one. Like, what's the difference between word and meaning? Entities, what are specifically characterized entities and what are generally characterized entities? What are the characteristics by which we identify phenomena? They're identifying marks. Qualities are, what are the qualities? Time is the 3 times past, present, and future. The qualities, I think, has to do with, like, in terms of the past, those phenomena that are supportive of progressing further on the path, and those that aren't. And reasonings are by function, nature, interdependence, and logical syllogism. And you can find these, Rinpoche describes them, and we'll see them later in this book. All these different ways of categorizing Vipassana, very foreign to us, very foreign to panoramic awareness. So Rinpoche presenting panoramic awareness. Why did he present the four types of Vipassana in terms of differentiation, complete differentiation, investigation, analysis? Why did he present the 6 discoveries? Are those panoramic awareness? Really interesting questions to ponder. The analysis of the order of Shamatha Vipassana, part Roman numeral V. Most sutra-oriented treatises contain numerous references to practicing Shamatha first, then Vipassana. Seems reasonable. The ornament says, on the basis of what is earlier, the latter develops. Profound statement. Because they are inferior and superior, coarse and subtle, they are given in that order. In the case of the 6 paramita, it is taught that the later ones depend on the earlier ones, and consequently, the earlier ones are considered inferior and the later superior, and similarly coarse and subtle. The letter to a friend, which is a text that Nagarjuna wrote. Nagarjuna wrote a letter to a friend of his who happened to be a king, the king of the region that he lived in. My friend, the king. There's no prajna without meditative concentration. There's no prajna without the 6th paramita, without the 5th one. And the entrance to the Bodhisattva's way of life by Shantidevis, he says, by being aware that Vipassana imbued with shamatha can conquer your mental afflictions, begin with shamatha. Similar
I have a
explanations.
question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm curious, the line at the bottom of the page about the fact that later things depend on earlier ones and consequently earlier ones are considered inferior. They seem to be saying that as if that's a point of truth in some way, but there's nothing inherently about what comes first being inferior. And you know, the classic thing they talk about with Nundro, that many times people say that the preliminaries are more profound than the main practice. So I'm just curious as to why this notion is put forward that way, as if it was a, you know.
Yeah, what a slight. Isn't it a bizarre judgment? It's like, wow, how could they say that so
I mean, it's like saying the
judgingly?
roof is more valuable than the foundation.
Foundation of the house. I know, it's like crazy, isn't it? Do you think they mean it in that way that we're understanding it, or is there maybe some other way that they mean it? I don't know.
Well, I
It
don't know
seems
if,
awful, like an awful put down, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah. I mean, it just seems not helpful. Also, that by demeaning, seemingly demeaning, unless they're simply saying that if the meaning of the earlier ones are considered inferior, if that means students mistakenly think of them that way, that would be, I guess, one interpretation. But somehow it doesn't seem like that's what they're saying, because they also went on and said this thing about coarse and subtle and all that.
Well, the coarse
Yeah.
and subtle is actually very interesting, and that sort of belies what we're seeing here on the surface. Because if the first thing is what results in coming to the subtle, then the first thing is like a sieve, right?
Yeah,
It acts as a sieve so it's actually responsible for the subtleties coming about.
yeah, which is, I mean, similar to when they talk about Nundro as being, extremely profound, even though the idea of it is it's getting to the next thing, and so we tend to think it's lesser, but that's definitely not the view of the masters. So anyway, just wanted to.
Yeah, it was a very interesting phrase, quite a put down of the early stages.
But couldn't it
But
be
on the other hand, sorry.
sorry, that superior simply means on top, that we imbue it with that meaning in our linguistic sort of bias, but it's almost like a hamburger. The superior, the bun on top is superior, and then it goes down and down and down. I think it may be that it's a different take on those terms.
It might be. It might be.
Well, couldn't that be a Buddhist for a second and say that there were a lot of traditions that all were practicing shamatha and samadhi, but the Buddhists, the thing that we had was vipassana, because that provided liberation, and we call it superior for that reason.
Yeah, what do you guys make of that?
Well, in that case, I mean, I think that there we're not just talking about what comes first and second. We're also talking about there, as you say, there's a certain depth of insight that's going on there that is said to be unique anyway. So that one I find is a little more acceptable. It's just this one that just seemed to be saying, what comes before is not as good. That didn't seem like any fundamental truth being, it seemed very highly questionable there. But,
Yeah, well, good to chew over these things, all over these things. Let's see. Similar explanations are found in the Shravagabhumi stages and instructions. On the basis of such statements, some claim with conviction that it is always the case that Vipassana meditation can only be undertaken once shamatha has been practiced and mastered. So here we get into the issue of like how much shamatha is enough for Vipassana. Is the reason they say shamatha is not achieved without achieving suppleness, without achieving those two, Vipassana and its suppleness will not be achieved. Without those two being shamatha and suppleness, Vipassana and its suppleness will not be achieved. Interesting, sort of separating the practice from its own suppleness. That is not correct, because there are those who achieve both shamatha and Vipassana without having achieved suppleness. So while suppleness is praised as like the perfection of them, there is an acknowledgement that he uses the word achieve. They achieve shamatha vipassana without going all the way to suppleness. We may ask, how is that so? It's because, and he lists his sources. He's authenticated his point by referring to them. These texts explain clearly that shamatha is the 9 mental stages and vipassana is the 4. The differentiation of phenomena and the others. Interesting that he mentions the fourfold approach of Vipassana, and he compares that to the 9 stages, implying that the fourfold is a progressive order, whereas the others don't seem to be necessary. The other ways of classifying Vipassana don't necessarily seem to be progressive. The 6 categories are not really progressive stages, and the three types, characteristics, and thorough investigation and discernment are not really a progressive order. But anyway, that was not his point here. So he's saying that shamatha exists on each of the 9 stages and vipassana exists on each of those 4. And it is very difficult for beginners to achieve suppleness in the early phases of achieving shamatha and vipassana. Furthermore, according to those who make such assertions, whatever is shamatha must be consummate shamatha, whatever is vipassana must be consummate vipassana. Because they say that whatever is shamatha or vipassana must be the achievement of its respective suppleness. So some people say it's only shamatha unless it's like perfectly complete, and same with vipassana. Other people are a little more lenient. If they accept that, then for the same reason, whatever is a path must be a consummate path. In other words, you're not on the path until you've completed the path. By that logic, right? Which is a great way of responding. We may now ask, why do that sutra and that text teach that meditations in which suppleness has not been achieved are not shamatha vipassana? Such statements have in mind the criteria for the achievement of consummate shamatha and vipassana, because were that not the case, there would be many internal contradictions according to the above explanations and disagreements with scriptures and reasoning. Which is a little bit like a sort of a politician statement. Like, it would be a problem. Therefore, explanations that Vipassana meditation depends on shamatha are intended for the gradual type of individual. Interesting classification. I wonder which type all of us are, because there are those who achieve Vipassana even though they have not achieved shamatha. Oh my God. The compendium of Abhidharma says some achieve Vipassana but do not achieve shamatha. They will strive for shamatha on the basis of Vipassana. So even that sort of holy grail of the progressive order is not universal. And indeed, in the Buddha's early sutras, he also talks about individuals that achieve Vipassana before shamatha. And he has a phrase for them called dry insight workers. Dry insight workers. Workers is a translation of, I guess, practitioner. I don't know. And wet insight or moist insight workers, those practitioners, those who have experienced this, the completion of shamatha, and in that case, the four absorptions. Anyway, the Yogacara Bhumi explains, you may know the truths from suffering to the path, from A to Z, accurately, just as they are, without having attained the first meditative concentration or beyond. You may know all this, and still, without even having achieved any of the absorption states, as soon as you have such knowledge, rest your mind and do not engage in differentiating phenomena. On the basis of that superior prajna, you can pursue the practice of superior states of mind. That's a little bit of a confusing statement. I'm not sure exactly what that clarifies. But those are indispensable statements. Also, throughout the tantras and the treatises on the generation and perfection phases, the two stages of Vajrayana practice, sometimes called creation and completion, there are instructions for meditating with characteristics at the beginning of the session, such as on the form of the deity and so forth, and meditating without characteristics at the end of the session when the deity dissolves into emptiness. We meditate on emptiness. Those two sets of instructions indicate that it is not the case that the approach is that only when shamatha has been practiced and mastered can we meditate on vipassana. There are many instructions by numerous Mahasiddhas to cultivate Vipassana right from the beginning without pursuing shamatha separately. So this is something that's more common in Vajrayana. Mahasiddhas. What was Tripura Vishaya Mahasiddha? There are many instructions by numerous, in particular, since this practice lineage teaches two approaches, pursuing meditation within the view and pursuing the view within meditation, it is not certain that there is one definite order. Thank you. That's nice. There's some flexibility in that one. The way to cultivate the unification of shamatha and vipassana has two parts. And the first part is the reason both shamatha and vipassana are necessary, since a mind without shamatha moves about like water. It lacks equipoise. A mind that cannot rest in equipoise will not achieve what is true and correct. Vipassana that has no shamatha is unstable, like a candle flame in a windy place. Since it cannot give rise to the brilliant light of wisdom, shamatha is necessary. The first stages of meditation says, because the mind is fluid like water, it will not be still without the foundation of shamatha. The mind that does not rest in equipoise cannot know what is true just as it is. The Bhagavan said, by resting in equipoise, you will know what is true just as it is. The middle or second stages of meditation by Kamala Shila, and that was from the first. The second one says, did I skip something? Since a mind that cannot rest in equipoise will not achieve. Vipassana that has no shamatha is unstable like a candle flame in a windy place. Okay, back to the middle stages. With a vipassana that has no shamatha, yogins and yoginis' minds are distracted by objects like a candle flame in a windy place spot. They are unstable. In that case, the light of wisdom will not shine brilliantly. Thus it is that you should practice both. It's thought that no matter how much we cultivate a shamatha that lacks vipassana, we won't be able to eliminate our obscurations, even though we may suppress our mental afflictions for a time. So this is the way these are presented, is that shamatha suppresses mental afflictions, calms them, tames them temporarily. And it's only with Vipassana, seeing into the true nature of reality as being without a self of persons and phenomena, that we're able to uproot the mental afflictions, kleshas. We won't be able to destroy the dormant tendencies of our mental afflictions, and won't be liberated from the problems of samsara, such as birth, aging, sickness, death, and so forth. The middle stages of meditation again explains, becoming familiar with just shamatha alone does not remove obscurations for yogins and yoginis. It simply suppresses their mental afflictions for a while. Without the light of prajna, dormant tendencies cannot be destroyed. Therefore, the unraveling the intense as meditative concentration suppresses the mental afflictions, i.e. shamatha. Prajna destroys their dormant tendencies. Prajna being that which is cultivated through Vipassana. Continues. The Bodhisattva's Pitaka, which is a very cool sutra, the Bodhisattva Pitaka, recently translated by 84,000 if you're interested. Those who have not heard the teachings of the Bodhisattva's Pitaka, which is a play off of the tree or three Pitakas of the early collection of sutras of the Vinaya Sutra and Abhidharma Pitakas, baskets. Pitaka meaning baskets or collections of teachings. So here we have the Bodhisattva's collection of teachings. Who have not heard the noble Dharma of the Vinaya, who take samadhi alone to be superb, succumb to overt pride through the force of their arrogance. So if you just focus on meditation and don't calm or pacify your activity through something approaching Vinaya, will be overcome by pride through the force of arrogance. They will not be free from birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, suffering, unhappiness, or distress. This famous list of negative experiences that the Buddha repeats frequently in the early sutras. They will not escape from the samsara of the six kinds of beings, the six realms. They will not be liberated from the heaps of suffering. With that in mind, the Tathagata said, those who listen to or learn from others about what is suitable will escape aging and death. Shamatha is necessary so that mind does not move from its object. Vipassana is necessary for the realization of suchness that prevents being swayed by bad views. It makes the mind like a mountain. We need both shamatha and vipassana as the moon lamp. Sutra says the force of shamatha makes your mind unwavering. Vipassana makes it like a mountain. That's cool. Rinpoche uses those analogies of the analogy of water. We have that somewhere here as well. The way to unify shamatha and vipassana is the second part. Under the category, the way to cultivate the unification, we may wonder how exactly are they unified in the context of meditating on Vipassana without having achieved the ninth mental state of resting. There are ways of unifying Vipassana with each stage of shamatha. However, here the approach is to unify the consummate shamatha and Vipassana, the completion. Once you have achieved the ninth mental state of resting, the shamatha of equipoise, free from the faults of dullness or agitation, when you exert yourself in the vipassana of the differentiation of phenomena, which I believe is the first of the four stages of vipassana, that vipassana engages naturally. So it happens, it succeeds, that vipassana succeeds because it's based upon the ninth stage of shamatha. Like the ninth mental state of resting, it proceeds effortlessly without needing excessive application. So vipassana happens naturally at that point when we've accomplished shamatha. Vipassana becomes pure and cleansed when it mixes with mental stillness and they become balanced. That is the unification of shamatha vipassana. Vasanga Stravakabhumi says, how do you mix shamatha and vipassana and unify them in a balanced way? You take 2 parts of shamatha and 2 parts of vipassana and mix them in a boiling water. Bring them to a boil. Why is that called a path of unification? It is said that it develops from the 9 mental states of resting, shamatha, based on having achieved the ninth state, equipoise, and mastering samadhi, you exert yourself in a superior prajna of differentiating phenomena, as opposed to the mundane prajna of understanding things like how your car works. At that time, you naturally and effortlessly engage that path of differentiating phenomena because of the basis on shamatha. Since the path of shamatha is the appropriate absence of active application, vipassana is pure, cleansed, follows shamatha, and is infused with a delightful feeling. Such shamatha vipassana mix and become balanced. That is called the path that unites shamatha and vipassana. The final, or third, part of the stages of meditation comments, because your mind is isolated from dullness and agitation, it rests evenly and engages naturally. When this brings suchness clearly to mind, so suchness is not a quality, suchness is the object that comes to mind, suchness being a certain slant on emptiness that doesn't emphasize the negative aspect of emptiness, but emphasizes the sort of union of absence and luminosity, or emptiness and luminosity is suchness. 2 parts emptiness and 1 part luminosity is suchness. When this brings suchness clearly in mind, you have equanimity because you have relaxed your efforts, which is an odd phrase, but that's the way equipoise is described in the scheme of shamatha. The stage just before that is relaxing, the stage of equipoise is achieved by no longer applying antidotes when you don't need to. So it's resting. Know that at that point you have mastered the path that unites shamatha vipassana, and the instructions on PP, Prajna Paramita, says next focus on a conceptual representation. So think about body. What is body or mind? When your mind experiences both, i.e. shamatha vipassana, in an uninterrupted and continuous stream of attention, that is called the path that connects the pair, shamatha vipassana. Shamatha vipassana are the pair. Connects means to possess each other. They operate bound together. They operate simultaneously. Conceptual representations are the objects of vipassana. Generally, it is thought that non-conceptuality is the object of meditation for shamatha, and conceptuality is the object of meditation for vipassana. Based on that, some assert that shamatha is only the mind not attending to any phenomena, not conceptualizing anything at all. Here we go. The issue that Cynthia mentioned, that was discussed by Elizabeth in the introduction. Some assert that shamatha is only the mind not attending to any phenomena and not conceptualizing anything at all, and vipassana is only the mind conceptualizing all phenomena. That is illogical. Were that the case, it would be impossible to have shamatha with characteristics such as the generation process. The creation process of Vajrayana meditation is full of concepts. What does that mean? It means that when they cultivate the shamatha that focuses on the Buddha's, the Tathagata's form, as an example of an object of a practice of creation stage, Vajrayana practice, they would have to accept that the image of the Tathagata's form is not conceived of, that image that we create of the deity is not conceived and is not observed, because they have asserted that during shamatha the mind does not engage any phenomena and is non-conceptual. The unification of shamatha vipassana would also be impossible, because if shamatha does not conceive any phenomena and vipassana is conceptual, never the twain shall meet. There can be no common locus for non-conceptuality and conceptuality. If a common locus were possible, it would be the source of ridicule for the dialecticians. Give them more things to make fun of us about. We might ask, is it that the image of the Tathagata's form is merely appearing to a mental consciousness, but it is not conceptual? If it is not designated by thought, there's no object appearing in that way. An appearance is what appears to thought, because everything with characteristics such as the generation process is said to be conceptually imputed. So basically, he's doing what Cynthia indicated earlier, totally breaking down this idea that shamatha is non-conceptual and vipassana is conceptual. Let's see. It is also illogical to say that all vipassana involves conceptuality because the stages of meditation speaks of an unmoving vipassana called panoramic awareness, maybe? Because non-conceptual wisdom is the object seen by vipassana, and because that wisdom is the true vipassana. So to the extent that Rinpoche describes panoramic awareness as being awareness of non-conceptual wisdom as the object seen by vipassana. Furthermore, shamatha involving discerning prajna would be impossible because they say that shamatha involving conceptuality is impossible and that shamatha is only not thinking about anything at all. Also, their assertion would mean that the teachings that shamatha is attentiveness and that it has 4 types of attention are wrong. So shamatha has 4 stages in the build-up of the full attention and the culmination. And then mindfulness and alertness during shamatha meditation would have to be the mind not being attentive because they've asserted that shamatha is the mind not attending to any phenomena. So they basically negated the definition of shamatha as being mindfulness and alertness. Now we may ask, why are the objects of shamatha and vipassana taught in that way? They are said to be the usual objects of shamatha and vipassana. Those, rather. However, if we take one locus, such as shamatha and vipassana, observing a deity's form, there will be 2 aspects. Shamatha's vivid image of that form that is the focus for and what appears to the mental consciousness, and the nature of that form that vipassana differentiates and analyzes. As that shows, shamatha is not thinking about any phenomena other than the object of meditation and settling the mind right on that object, while vipassana is differentiating, conceptualizing the nature of that object, or having a certainty that knows it to be without any essence. On that basis, the 2 mix and become inseparable, being of one essence but discrete isolates, which is an odd technical term that means that they have distinctly different characteristics, such as a fire is hot and burning, the 2 different aspects of fire. So shamatha and vipassana are thereby unified. And since we're out of time, we'll, I think, pause there and continue wherever we ended up today, which is at the bottom of 42 in the future. Final comments, suggestions, announcements, questions, thoughts?
At the risk of opening a whole can of worms, how does this relate to the Theravada term vipassana?
Theravadan Vipassana, when we go into Vipassana in detail, he'll say there's 4 types of Vipassana. There's Vipassana practiced in the tradition common to non-Buddhist traditions such as Hinduism that practice absorption meditation. And then there's Vipassana of the Sutrayana system, which is the Theravadan version that's focused on the 4 Noble Truths. In their condensed form of the 3 marks of existence, which is the usual way that Vipassana in the Theravadan system is contextualized or described, particularly these days. Whereas if you go to the core treatises of the Theravadan system, like Buddhaghosa's Path of Purification, the first stage in insight is identifying the difference between mind and body, differentiating mind and body. So it has a similarity of differentiating phenomena, identifying phenomena. And that's not the way that it's currently presented in the common insight meditation these days. It's described as identifying the 3 marks of existence in every moment of mind as one is meditating.
Thank you.
Neil, I'm sorry.
page 38, where it talks about, in the last big paragraph on that page, the two approaches, pursuing meditation within the view and pursuing the view within meditation. Those are not just synonyms for shamatha and vipassana, are they?
No, they are synonyms, not synonyms. So the view is understanding that comes from prajna, of understanding the two truths, understanding the four truths, understanding the true nature of reality as it's contextualized in whatever system one is referring to, the earlier system or the Mahayana system or the Vajrayana system. So the view is understanding the nature of reality, and meditation is samadhi. And so um, there's those two approaches are just sort of approaches different traditions take. Like the Gelugpa tradition is famous for emphasizing that meditation comes out of the view, and so they spend a lot of time and a lot of effort cultivating the view, understanding the Dharma in all of its aspects really well, and debating it and so forth. And then finally they'll enter into meditation, and based on their very precise understanding of the view. And Kagyu tradition, as most of us have experienced, starts the other way around. First thing we do is we get meditation instruction. And with that as the basis, we understand the fickleness of mind. We understand suffering as being the constant, obsessive need for entertainment and preoccupation that our mind experiences vividly in meditation practice. So we come to understand the view from meditation practice. And ideally one does both simultaneously, which is very much the Kagyu Nyingma tradition, is meditating and studying together. And very rarely does one see a tradition that is solely just meditation, no study, but it does happen.
Thank you.
Barbara,
Um,
and then we'll close.
put a PDF into the chat. It's a
Oh, yeah.
2-page thing about panoramic awareness, which is an excerpt from Rinpoche's books, Sex, Work, and Money. And he calls it panoramic awareness is Buddha nature in that particular, in case, anyway, if anyone interested, it's there.
That's great. Let's just take a quick look at that. So, where are we? That's why so let's see, this kind of positive doesn't try to push away negatives. What is that? Even perceiving the negatives as a vision of the positives. That's why we speak of panoramic awareness, which is the basic positive thinking. Relating with panoramic awareness could be said to be a way of freeing ourselves from the chain reaction of karma, which is based on hope and fear. Let's see, the positivity of panoramic awareness is restful. It opens the situation and brings spaciousness and a meditative state of being. At the very moment that is present, there's no furthering of karmic cause and effect. No karmic seed is planted or developed. Panoramic awareness is the basic trust that the space is there already. Panoramic awareness is Buddha nature. That's cool. Panoramic
To me, it
awareness
sounds a
is
lot
Buddha
like left
nature.
brain, right brain.
That's interesting.
So the
Yeah.
right brain is more panoramic, and the left brain is more focused. and word oriented.
Yeah, it does have a distinct similarity, doesn't it? That's really cool. Thank you, Barbara, for that. Trungpa Rinpoche, panoramic awareness as Buddha nature. That's so cool. So on that note, let's do our dedication and close. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death from the ocean of samsara. May I free all beings by the confidence of the golden sun of the great east. May the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you, Derek.
Your homework for next week is to figure out if your object of meditation is conceptual or non-conceptual. Thank you all. Nice to see you.
Thanks.
Both.
Thank you.